Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Halliday, and welcome to the Clean Capitalist Leadership Council 4th Annual Meeting, CCLC2020, Open for Innovation, y bienvenidos a la gente de Latinoamérica. We have an ambitious program today that will touch upon energy policy, innovation policy, tax incentives, trade barriers, and opening markets to new innovative technology and competition. I'd like to thank all the attendees and panelists for sharing their valuable time and sharing their expertise with us. Rod Richardson is the co-founder of the Clean Capitalist Leadership Council and will moderate many of the sessions along with our expert session leaders. We're very pleased to be an official event of Climate Week 2020 and National Clean Energy Week, and this event is streaming on EarthXTV. EarthX and its founder, Trammell S. Crow, have been with us since 2016, and we really appreciate their support. And Trammell is going to say a few words about EarthX. Trammell, take it away.
Good to see you guys. I'm sure and glad to be included for the 4th year. In my prepared remarks, I was going to remind people that Adam Smith also talked about common values and morality when he talked about free trade. I always like to make that plug. I never do hear that. People talk about one book that he wrote. And then I was going to give a commercial plug for EarthXTV, so I'll be brief. Thank you for letting me interrupt the thought process. Just like when we started 10 years ago on this little expo in Dallas for Earth Day, where we thought we'd have exhibitors and the public and so forth, which has turned into 200,000 people, 700 exhibitors, 15 conferences, all these things that we just had to cancel. We've gone to EarthXTV. We hope to be back with the conference and with the real actual event in 21 or 22. But we haven't found any significant media source of environmental news or information in depth or anything that's a significant media source with lots of it. Certainly nothing that addresses all issues. So that's what we've started to do as of this week. We've got our niche of Republican and Democrat and all perspectives, also dealing with all the various environmental issues, not getting hung up on climate. We've had we had 50 hours of programming this week, and I hope you all will tune into EarthX TV at earthx.org and look forward to meeting y'all.
So how about we go to Rod Richardson? He and Jigar Shah are going to start the first session. Rod, say a few words, please.
Sure. Listen, I want to thank all of you very, very much for coming and zooming into our Charette and the Clean Capitalist Leadership Council 4th annual meeting. It's great to be coming back to Charette format. We actually started off this journey in 2016 through the Grace Richardson Fund with a Charette at Columbia with the Rocky Mountain Institute. So it's interesting to be getting back to that now. I want to thank very much my co-chair, Trammell, and also to my co-hosts, the Reason Foundation with Julian Morris, Clear Path with Jeremy Harrell. We will have Charles Hernick from Crest coming in later, Marcin Brentnowski from the British Conservation Alliance. We have Roberto Salinas Leon from the Atlas Center for Latin America. Very pleased to have actually 4 different Atlas free market think tanks involved in this, including Guillermo Peña Panting from Honduras. This journey began in 2016 when Grace Richardson Fund first announced our new program to an audience of private foundations and think tanks. And we invited people to come innovate a new fertile area of policy with us. We pointed out, look, from 2011 to 2015, the poster children of clean technologies had, gone from being out of the money and more expensive than fossil fuels to being cheaper than fossil fuels. Both wind and solar crossed that border from 2011 to 2015. And when that change happens, it implied 3 things. First of all, that all the policies that had come before then were now subtly off base and out of date. They were based on the wrong assumption that somehow you absolutely needed a price adjustment mechanism of some kind in order to make these work at all and get into the money. You needed a price support, you needed to hammer down fossil fuels with carbon taxes or carbon prices, and that was essential. But it turns out that if you have competitive technologies, what really is essential is to let them compete. And that is one of the most important things you can do. The second, implication is that there's a whole new policy lever that we can pull now. And that policy lever is that when you have new unsubsidized profits, suddenly the tax rates on those profits matter a great deal. And that marginal tax rate cuts can help to accelerate capital flows to clean solutions. That there's, in fact, a way to take into account negative externalities that doesn't necessarily involve imposing burdens on the economy or demonizing any one industry, that you can use positive feedback rewards rather than negative feedback loops. We don't necessarily beat students anymore in universities. We actually, find it's more useful to reward them. But in any event, so with this in mind, we started pioneering clean tax cuts, but as we developed those ideas, which we will get to later on, a little bit later on in the program, what we found was that really that first insight about how important it is to let clean technologies compete is super important. So today, what we want to do is look at ways that we can open markets faster. Because to date, most of the efforts to open competitive markets have been somewhat of a piecemeal nature. But maybe what we can do is think about this from a 30,000-foot perspective and look at competitive markets in the United States and uncompetitive markets and power markets and free trade overseas, and find out some commonalities about what it is that opens markets and come up with some good ideas for how to open those markets faster. And to lead off our discussion today on that, we have Lynne Kiesling, but Julian Morris brought Lynne to our table. So Julian, who is the running the environmental program for the Reason Foundation, could you introduce Lynne for us?
Very quickly. So Lynne is an economist with about 30 years experience working in a range of areas, but especially working on regulatory issues and with a deep expertise in electricity markets and their regulation. I don't think I need to explain any further, but Lynne, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Julian, and thank you, Rod, for including me in this. And I'm really pleased to see that you're convening such an important conversation. Part of, I think, in this first session, some of the ideas that we wanted to put on the table have to do with how we open power markets to innovation and competition. And I'd just like to set the stage a little bit by making some introductory comments about the US landscape. And then I'm going to lateral the ball over to Pat Wood after I introduce him so that he can give some more detail from his experience. One of the challenges, and Rod used the word piecemeal, and I think that that's a really important concept to bear in mind when we think about the opportunities for competition and competitive markets to align environmental and economic incentives in the power industry. And so opportunities, but also identifying the challenges and the pinch points. And in part, one of the things that I think is a recurring theme that we see in the US landscape is the kind of overarching institutional framework that we've inherited through the 90 years almost now of history with the Federal Power Act and the regulatory jurisdiction split between the states, with jurisdiction over distribution and retail, and federal with distribution over bulk power and wholesale. And I know some of our participants have particular interests in kind of breaking open the black box of the Federal Power Act. Some of the challenges have been that as technology changed in the power industry, one of the hats I wear is technology historian, and so I always kind of look through the lens of technology and innovation. The technological innovations of the 80s and 90s really unleashed the potential for competition in generation and the creation of wholesale power markets. That journey is incomplete, though, because we really did start with wholesale power markets and focused on wholesale power markets. And really, I would argue, only in one place in the entire country have we had a holistic restructuring that amounts to the kind of deregulation that can create the competitive incentives, the competitive forces, and the competitive discipline to allow for both the static efficiency and then the dynamic kind of innovative efficiency in power markets, and that's Texas. And so that's one of the reasons why I thought having Pat Wood in this conversation would be crucial. Pat brings a wealth of expertise to this question, having served as the chair of the Texas PUC during its restructuring, and then later going on to be the chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then after completing public service, he has been involved in a lot of investment opportunities in the clean tech area. So I'm just going to kind of stop there and say, the legal institutions and the regulatory framework are really frame up what some of our challenges are. Texas is a good model for, I think, how we should think differently about aligning environmental and economic incentives through markets. So Pat, I'm going to lateral the ball to you and ask you to give us some introductory remarks.
Great, thanks, Lynn, and thank you all for inviting me to be here. I think kind of the punchline here is why competition? And so when I go back to a day when I was interviewed by George W. Bush, and that would have been early '95, to be on the PUC, I said, I wanted to check with him before I wandered into a tar baby job, that I said, well, why do you want to do this? And he said, okay, better prices, better service, technological innovation. He said, that's kind of the easy stuff. But then he finally said, because it doesn't need regulating. He said, why are we regulating? The utilities care more about what the government thinks than what their customers think, and that's wrong. So it's kind of the customer-centric vision that really kind of initiated us. I think there are different kind of points of origin for all the places around the globe where you've seen much more direction toward competitive markets in power, but ours was customer based, and so our large industrial customers, which are probably a significant, well, maybe not significant, but bigger percentage of our total consumption in Texas than they would be in, say, Vermont. They were very much politically active and really had the political power to offset the utilities who'd had a century of monopoly preference. So that was a significant issue in kind of the politics of it, having the governor strongly behind it, because he just philosophically believed in competition versus monopolies. It's kind of was an easy sell to a lot of Republicans, but so the trick was how to sell it to the Democrats. And so that really is where the customer focus on this thing. And interestingly enough, the environmental issues that flowed from our competition market opening deregulation were really a second tier deal. They were a part of the bill, to be sure. There was a requirement to close down dirty power plants or to pay to clean them up. But there was also a renewable portfolio standard that was said, hey, we want to put Texas on the map of getting from what we had, which was basically zero, some old hydro plants that weren't that efficient, going from that base to 200 or 2,000 more megawatts of power. So it was modest in its 70,000 megawatt market to do that kind of addition, but it was in there, and it was kind of viewed as to the world as a big welcome mat. That this competitive market's going to crack wide open. There'll be addressable customers of all sizes, from municipal utilities to military bases to big box retailers to residential customers and everybody in between. But we've got this welcome mat from this bipartisan legislature that looks like they want to have some renewable energy. So needless to say, from those of y'all that haven't followed the Texas market, we now are the number 5 nation in the world. The state of Texas is, as far as renewable electricity in our power system, and that was really driven completely by the market. The 2,000 megawatts was blown through. It was raised to 5. It was blown through. It was raised to 10,000 megawatts. It was blown through that. We've got 27,000 megawatts of mostly wind and now more and more solar coming into the state, displacing coal, displacing inefficient natural gas. There's still plenty of natural gas on the grid. Texas sits, as you know, right on top of a lot of it, as do a number of states. But in any event, those kind of things all came together. We had great resource. I think that was a blessing. Culturally, it wasn't tough for people to say making money out of energy is kind of the Texas way, whether it comes from under the ground or above it. We don't really care. So people are always so shocked that it's a red state, but it wasn't a red-blue issue. And I think, I really like the charge of this charrette today, is that it really does look at how do we kind of get past the politics of this thing and get back to the original game, which is incentivizing, technology-loving, customer-friendly markets. They're kind of independent of this left-right political thing that came into place after I left government. So anyway, I look forward to delving into deeper with that, but that's just a little teaser about how Texas got on the map and why we continue to try to do it. It's customer driven, and it's all about economic development. How do you make a good location and a good place for people to live and have jobs? And so this has been a big part of that Texas story for the last 20 years.
Thank you very much, Pat, for joining us. It's an honor to have you in the mix. I just want to underscore one thing that Pat mentioned, because I think it's important for us as we think about how to move markets. You mentioned that one of the things that made the Texas market move in the competitive direction was the fact that it already had a lot of folks in the market who were independent energy producers who were primed to become independent power producers. My takeaway from that is that we will have more success moving markets to competition if we can increase the number of people who are in that category, who are independent power producers, ready to jump in further into that competition game. So with that, Lynn, go ahead and let's please continue.
Great, thanks, Rod. And thank you, Pat. One other piece of the puzzle in terms of preparing for this event was that my collaborator, Mike Giberson at Texas Tech University, and I have written a bit of a framing essay to help Julian and Rod and Jigar think about how the kind of policy proposals that they're thinking about intersect with the kind of tricky regulatory environment in the US. And so Mike is here, and at this point, Mike, I'm gonna just hand the floor over to you and ask you to say a couple of things quickly from your perspective in Texas, and also from the perspective as an energy researcher and some of the ideas that you and I have developed.
Thank you, and I appreciate to being part of this conversation. Let me be kind of parochial in my start, because I'm here in Lubbock, Texas. Lubbock has the distinction, we have a we have an interesting electric power history in Lubbock that goes back, we had 90 years or so of dual wire competition in the city. We were served by a local municipal utility and a private utility, and basically two sets of wires down, and this is the sort of thing that economic theory says can't be done or is going to be wildly inefficient. But we had prices as low pretty much as anywhere else in the state, and better service. So in fact, about 10 years ago, the city utility bought out the private competitor. But now Lubbock, which is on the fringes of the Southwestern Public Service territory, is switching next year into ERCOT. So we're joining ERCOT, and the city utility plans to become the first municipal utility to opt into competition. So I'm looking forward to getting competition back into Lubbock, and in fact, better competition than we had before, because we had two choices, which was twice as many as most people, but soon we're going to have 30 or 40 choices or 150 choices. So this is all it's sort of exciting to be here, and both with Lubbock's history, but also with its sort of promising future. The Texas power market, well, it's been a model. We were a model in 2002 when we started, but we haven't been static. The Texas market has been evolving. It's faced some challenges. There's been concerns, and I mean, I don't want to cross my fingers too much. I mean, but sort of we seem to be managing. And, the lights are staying on. Mm-hmm. And so, and there's plenty of renewable being built, as Pat highlighted. Consumers, there's no longer, when we started, there was a 1 or 2 cent per kilowatt hour premium that consumers paid for high renewable content contracts, but now there's essentially no premium anymore, right? It's the same price. You can get 100% renewable for the same price as almost anything else. It's just, I think it's a great story, not just for competition, but for the environmental benefits that have come along with it. I think the surprising thing for me has been how tough it's been to sell this success story in other states, because Nevada tried and had a good effort at trying to move to competition. They've talked about it in Arizona now. They've talked about it in Florida and other states, and but it seems like such an obvious success in Texas that I'm surprised that we can't seem to sell it elsewhere.
And we're going to have to move to Guillermo for a fascinating story from Honduras. But just to underline that last point, Lynn or Pat or one of you, one of our central hypotheses in the clean free market policy is that, it really makes a difference to let clean technologies compete. And we think that it will translate into competitive markets decarbonizing faster and cheaper and more stably than uncompetitive markets. Do you think that proposition is true? Who wants to take that on?
Well, I mean, as one who's seen it firsthand, yes. I mean, if we'd have trusted the regulated utilities to lead the drive into decarbonized markets, I don't think we'd be anywhere. Now, I think it's starting to happen 25 years later in states other than Texas, because vertically integrated utilities, monopolies, are being able to envision that they could put those in rate base, which is, of course, the great end game of regulated utilities, is to be able to rate base and get large returns on equity, much larger than a market would give. So yes, I mean, my thought is, having seen it firsthand, technological innovation is not rewarded in the regulated market.
Right.
You're beaten down with monopsony power. You have one buyer. That one buyer beats you down to the core. There's not a healthy competitive market for the innovative technologies. I can be convinced otherwise, but I just haven't seen it. I mean, there's nothing intuitive that you can't get a monopoly and align their interests right. But nobody's willing to do that. The power, regulatory power corrupts over time, and I don't think that is very conducive to a technologically innovative environment.
So, Jigar, do you have anything to add on?
I mean, the folks who've talked before me are the world's experts, and so I'm not sure I have much to add except to say that my own point of view going up against utility is that they do a lot of irrational things on a regular basis, and so we always hope for rationality, but in the end are sorely disappointed, as Pat suggests.
I would like to pull into the conversation Guillermo Peña Panting from Honduras. Guillermo has done a fantastic job of helping to move the power markets in Honduras in the direction of something that looks more like Texas. And just let me say that, the situation in the developing world in countries like Honduras is far more dire than in the United States, because these crony-dominated power markets, are a dead stop to any development. You can't build anything if there's no power to plug it into. And these, crony-dominated power markets are so much power is being stolen and so much money is being stolen that they're delivering energy poverty, rolling blackouts, contributing a tremendous amount to the national debt. Women and children have to cook indoors over, garbage fires that are causing millions of deaths a year around the world. Women can't be liberated because they can't afford a washing machine. There's no power to plug it into. But Guillermo is addressing that. So Guillermo, can you tell us what are the key factors that led to the Honduran energy market opening up, that we can learn from? And tell us a little bit about what's going on in that market now and the threats you're facing.
Hi, Rod. Hi, everyone else. Thanks for having us. And it's a great pleasure to be on this 4th annual event. So Honduras has been moving, or this is the second reform that Honduras has tried since the early 90s to open up its markets. And the last one didn't really work. In this case, the legislation was changed to allow for an unbundling of the state utility to break up distribution transmission and move away from a single buyer system to a multiple buyer system. To put in context, our power generation is largely private, although the state utility still had some generation of its own. I've also brought in 2 good friends who've been a really big part of this effort, Jose Morán and Kevin Rodriguez, who Jose is the head regulator currently right now, and Kevin leads the Generators Association. Both have had a huge, I think, great results in the process, and allowing Eléutera to help out has been completely satisfying. So it wasn't until about a year ago, or a year and a half ago, that Jose came into the regulatory commission, and last, I think it was September, he asked me through Eléutera, through our work at Eléutera, if we would help out to put on the consumer hat inside the system operator and help to set up what is now the system operator and a functioning spot market. So this effort started. We have a board at the system operator where all actors are representative: transmission, distribution, now consumers. Which the first consumer was registered into the market just this week. I hope Jose can say more about how that plan is going along. But we're moving into this unbundling system. The spot market is functional now, small but functional. And now we're getting into one of the hard parts, I think, is in the operation, getting past the regulatory process, is in sending the right signals into the market. And I'm going to let Jose speak more about that issue, because I think there's people here who can help us a lot, and I think that's one of the main purposes of this meeting. Yeah, Rod.
Guillermo, before you do that, I want to get to the, what was the precipitating factor, the thing that made Honduras move to deregulate? What was it that incentivized their move? Because I think that's important.
There was
important to bring up.
Massive dissatisfaction in the population with the energy service. We've been dealing for years with blackouts in certain periods of the year and expensive power as well. So investment, high energy consumption investment is limited by the possibilities of expensive power. And that, along with a very political process that had happened for contracts before this new energy system came in, made the whole sector look like a very bad, just enemy of the people. The state utility, just the whole industry was in trouble. So, and because of this whole political process, there was a lot of rent-seeking opportunity, and within that opportunity, we saw that the need, especially with having Guatemala and El Salvador having done their reform over 20 years ago and having been able to reduce power, increase competition, eliminate blackouts completely, we had these neighbors who had done their job, done their homework and solved their problem while we were still stuck in the same problem. And the final, I think, kicker was that the debt, or the annual deficit from the state utility, was so large that it almost represented 50% of the government's annual deficit. And when the government tried to restructure its finances because of just economic hardship, like many other governments have, and trying to start to put out sovereign debt, because Honduras hadn't done that in decades also. The IMF came in to try to do a general structuring, a plan, a longer-term plan for the macroeconomics in the country, and part of that was you have to solve the energy problem. It was a main point in the agreements with the IMF, and I'm not here to defend or go against the IMF, but it did help that having that stability to propose solving the energy sector included unbundling the company and opening the markets. That was a very big effort that came, so not only from local dissatisfaction with the service, a company that was going under, and continuously funds needing to be shifted into the company that just wasn't getting its work done properly. And then he had the government finances, which got support. The reform gets support by international organizations like the IMF, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Central American Integration Bank, the World Bank. So kind of everyone on that club joined in on the unbundling of the state power company.
So it was a combination of factors that was just both internal dissatisfaction and people pushing from within the country, but also an external incentive. There was this incentive that they needed financing, and an international agreement helped to push the country into opening up markets for competition. So
absolutely, I think it was that, and we can see now that after 3 rounds of sovereign debt that have been issued, I think in the last probably 7 years, the first bonds were placed at around 11.5%, 10-year bonds. And this just 2 months ago, we had another emission, and those bonds were placed at just right around 5.5. And that has been part of that macro plan to fix and to promote some sort of predictability in the government's finances. The problem hasn't been fixed, but at least we're seeing the signs to come in, and now we're moving into a more competitive energy market, which should help solve some of these other issues, and at the end of the day, help to reduce the amount of cost of power and unleash some of the investment that we're trying to do. What the main effort is to improve the quality of life of all Hondurans.